It's 11:30. Thanks for joining us, everyone. My name's Jasper with Score Main. I'm joined by Danielle Nemeth, one of our mentors and a HR expert to give today's presentation on employee relations. An important aspect of running your business is having a good relationship with your employees if you have them. I want to thank Danielle for presenting today. I also want to thank today's sponsor, and that is the Maine Technology Institute, group we're very happy to always be working with. And quick plug, if you guys are here in the workshop and didn't already know about SCORE, we're a free business mentoring nonprofit where volunteers take their time to teach you the aspects of running your business from open to close. You can get a mentor for free at score.org and just enter your zip code. Danielle, why don't you take it away?
Hi, thank you. Can everybody see my screen? It should say welcome to Employee Relations.
Yeah, looks
Perfect.
good.
Great. My name's Danielle. I have 25 years of experience in HR. And I wanted to bring this topic today because I am an HR consultant and I do go into a lot of small businesses. And I see one of the biggest problems with the small businesses is employee relations. We work so hard to get our businesses up and running, and an employee can either make or break our business. So that's why I think it's essential that we at least touch base on this topic. I will be willing to answer questions or hear some scenarios if you have any employee issues at the end of the presentation, but feel free to jump in if you have any questions. So why do employee relations matter? Well, one, it's going to foster a positive work environment. It's going to set the tone of your company culture. And it's going to increase employee satisfaction and retention. Employee relations matter because it's going to mitigate some legal risk. And we can talk about that later on in the presentation. In addition to it, employee relations matter because it improves productivity and teamwork in the work environment. There are many different types of employee relationships, and the first one is peer-to-peer, where you're collaborating with your colleagues. Then there is manager to employee, which is leadership and performance feedback. We have cross departments where there's communications and cooperation across different departments in your organization. And then there's also the mentor and mentee relationship, the professional growth and the knowledge sharing when we want to mentor someone to the next level in our organization. And these things all matter to employees to have that peer-to-peer collaboration, to be able to speak to their manager and hear about their performance, to cross communicate with departments and make sure the flow is working throughout the organization. And then, of course, mentor to mentee. Employees want to know that you're invested in their professional growth and that you have a plan to mentor them to the next step. So employees are very observant. They observe everything that we just discussed, but they also observe their leaders. It's called the unspoken influence, and employees observe their leaders rather closely. They observe how the behavior is. They know when your leader is entering and exiting a room. And if you ever think about your employees and when you leave the room or when you enter the room, the atmosphere may or may not change some. But employees, they are so observant that they actually know, like when you're going to the bathroom, and it may be subconscious, but they know when you leave the room. They know when leaders are behaving well and not behaving well. So keep that in mind when you are present in front of your employees, because they are observing everything from the clothes you wear to how you present yourself to your attitude and your relationships towards other people, other employees, and other managers. Your leadership really sets the tone of your actions, of the standards in your organization, and employees will mimic that. Employees will emulate that. So how you behave as a leader in the organization is essential because, like I said, the unspoken influences of being a leader is that employees are continuously watching you and observing you. So it's important to think about employee relationships, think about fostering trust and fostering teamwork, enhancing your collaboration. Think about how you're engaging with employees. Are you positive? Are you having great relationships with them? Relationships really boost employee satisfaction. I can tell you that an employee, if an employer walks into the room and they're mad, your whole organization is going to know it. If you walk into the room and you're really happy, your organization is going to know it. The reason they're going to know it is because they're going to feel it just in the way you carry yourself and in your tone. So really think about that high engagement each and every day, especially when you're in front of your employees. When you have high engagement and really good collaboration and communication, it really strengthens the bond with an employee to the organization, really strengthens the culture of the organization. It's not the only thing, there's many different factors that go into culture, but it does. How you present yourself, your attitude, your demeanor is part of the culture because you as an owner or a leader really impacts the culture. In addition to that, think about how you interact with employees when there's conflict present. Because sometimes we all have bad days, employees have bad days. Some things happen that are out of control of the employee, and some misunderstandings may happen. So it's really important to avoid those conflict resolutions by having that open dialogue and communication and having the employees have that comfort level with you to go and speak with you and talk to you about what's happening within their organization and why they may be performing lower than other days. So some of the common employee relations challenges that really can break your culture and really can create issues within your organization is the number one is really communication. Try to break down those communication barriers and allow for great collaboration. Unclear messaging and unclear misunderstandings is a result of communication. So really think about ways you can communicate. I have some strategies that can help employers really communicate and send out the message. And if you're interested in that, please let me know. But think about, again, how you communicate to your employees and what methods you use. A lot of times, employers will tell me they send out emails. Well, that's great. It is a form of communication, but it might not be the best form of communication. We all get inundated with emails, and at times employees may not see your email. And then in addition to that, if your employees having an off day and they read an email from you, they might interpret the tone differently than what you intended. So again, it's always great to have that open communication and make them feel like they can come to you and that you'll help them or you'll understand. Workplace conflict also happens over disagreements over task or different opinions on how things are done. When that happens, when miscommunication happens, it starts creating a lack of trust between employees, between managers, and between employees and between managers. I have employees in there twice. And then the lines can be blurred if trust is starting to break down. People become unclear in their roles. Employees try to control things and it might clash with other employees. And then you might see attendance issues when we have miscommunication, when we have lack of trust, when we have employee conflicts developing. So some of the consequences of poor employee relations is, again, we kind of hit on it on my last slide prior, is increased turnover where employees feel undervalued. So they'll leave and look for another job. And all that money you spent training them and trying to keep them is out the window. Low morale. When a toxic work environment causes disengagement, employees become resentful. They feel like they're not valued. They, in turn, start not producing or their productivity goes down. So think about the consequences of the poor behavior, of the poor communication, the poor collaboration, the demeanor of your leaders. In addition, high absentee employees tend to call out sick when you have a poor culture in place. And then, of course, when you have a poor culture in place, people start feeling, they start complaining, they start feeling that they're being harassed or discriminated against, even though they may not be. What I see a lot of times is employees will say, I feel harassed, I feel targeted, I feel like I'm being scrutinized. I feel like I'm being micromanaged. Those are keywords to really to listen for when you have employee dissatisfaction and when your culture can take a turn for the worse. When your culture isn't doing so well, you'll start seeing conflict and unresolved issues with other employees, and it might escalate and it starts impacting others around. One employee may feel like they're in a toxic work environment and they'll come in, they'll be all negative, and then that impacts somebody else's day. That impacts the tone of the day and the tone of your culture. And if it continues to happen, all that hard work you did in building a business can easily be ruined by employees who don't trust their managers, who don't have open communication, and who are just unhappy. Of course, when you're unhappy, you're not motivated to do your job. So you have a lack of motivation and your customer experience declines. Unhappy employees equal unhappy customers. I put this slide in here because this is often one thing that we see a lot in organizations. And I want you to recognize when employees start deflecting, those are some early warning signs that they're not happy and that they're not being accountable for their actions, or that something deeper may be happening within your organization or within that person. So when you start talking to employees and maybe you're having a conversation about their performance, they might deflect. And what deflection looks like is they'll blame or they'll come up with any excuse, either not to talk about their performance or not to be accountable for their performance, or they'll deflect to try to get you off of the topic. It's something that I feel like is, I don't want to say natural for employees, but I feel like people just deflect. Whether it's subconscious or consciously. And for example, I was just dealing with an employee last week. We were talking about their performance. This person thought that they were being micromanaged. You know, despite all the other employees are happy, this particular person started started saying they're being micromanaged, they're being scrutinized, they will have computer issues, they have other issues, and really not owning their issues. They start blaming, shifting the blame on others. They're blaming other things or blaming others for their mistakes. They're avoiding taking responsibility for themselves. They avoid feedback. They might say, I can't attend that meeting. I'm too busy. They act defensive to constructive criticism, which will impede, of course, on professional development for them, right? Because employees need to know how to take constructive criticism better. They need to know if we can get past these communication barriers and really just take a hard look at ourselves, then we can start growing and really thinking about professional development for them. But they're busy making excuses, often trying to justify poor performance rather than looking for a solution. And again, you know, I just last week, an employee was like, oh, if I get a new computer, I won't have performance issues anymore, despite the fact that her computer was only a year old. And then again, constantly talking about how her manager's micromanaging her, right? Deflecting all from different things other than her performance. This particular person did not want to attend group meetings or huddles. And, you know, when she did attend those meetings, she was very disengaged and avoided the discussions. So just kind of keep your eye out when you're having conversations or employee huddles, employee meetings for the people who appear to be disengaged, right? Because, you know, these subtle resistance, the procrastinating, the sarcasm really influences your culture and really starts breaking down, you know, what you've worked so hard to build. It really starts impacting happy employees when you have one employee in the pack who's not happy and lets everybody know it. So addressing employees who tend to deflect or addressing employees' behavior is, you know, encourage open communication. Start having mediated conversations. Really and look at your policies and procedures. Have clear policies and procedures about how performance is issued, about how about how performance is communicated. Have clear policies on what happens if you have an underperformer. Really think about having those policies in place, and those could look like an employee handbook that addresses, you know, discipline process, that addresses low performance, that addresses attendance issues, that addresses many different aspects of what employee really needs to know. They need to have those clear expectations and those clear guidelines, which is why employee handbooks and job descriptions are so important. So they have those clear lines, this clear message of what their job is and the expectations of their job, expectations of the culture, and, you know, expectations on how things are handled if indeed there is an issue. If it is beyond your scope or you don't think that your managers handle conflict well, because a lot of times our managers are new managers, seek professional guidance. That's what I'm here for. That's what consultants are here for. We seek professional guidance, or we help small businesses navigate through these employee issues. So have clear policies, enforce those policies, be compliant, and be consistent is how you're going to resolve a lot of these issues. So upfront, develop those policies. Again, employee handbooks, job descriptions. Communicate those policies to your employees, letting them know that you have these things in place, and ensure that you're going to roll them out fairly and consistently. And then stay up to date on employment laws. So then you can change those policies and update those policies, and again, communicate the changes to your employees. All things I can help with, or a consultant can help with, should you need that help. Roll out performance management, where performance management are forms or conversations that take place where you're going to have set clear goals and expectations. Then you're going to provide them regular feedback, have meetings to communicate those expectations. It could be, I recommend having meetings with your employees on the quarterly basis and doing then one annual review. And I recommend that because oftentimes what happens is managers will do an annual review, but they'll only think about the things that has happened in the last 2 or 3 months. And they might remember something earlier in the year, but really what comes to their mind is what's happened in the last couple of months. Where if you do quarterly reviews, you can jot down some notes, some conversation between you and the employee. And then when it's time to do the annual review, you have quarterly notes to go back to. So then your actual annual review reflects the entire year and not just the past few months. So when you have those meetings, document those performance issues, document it in a performance management form, or at least on some notes where, other employees can't see. Keep those obviously confidential. And then think about using coaching methods to improve performance. Like, say things like, I know you're struggling here. How can we help? How can we get you there? What trainings do you need? What do you need from me as a leader to get you to perform better? And not, your employees will really appreciate the collaboration and recognize the time that you're taking. And they'll appreciate the rules or the expectations of the employee handbook, the policies, the procedures. Anyway, I'm going to give us a case study, and this is an actual case study of mine, one of my clients, probably a few years ago, but I had a client that called me, and they had 15 employees. They had been in business for 10 years. The owner really worked hard to get his business to where it needed to be. And he did have an operations manager who was there at the very beginning, and together they built his business. However, here it is 10 years later, employees aren't happy, the manager's not being respected, and often employees went straight to the owner to complain about the manager. The employer wanted to retain the employees, so he attempted to keep them happy by giving them what they needed or what they wanted. As a result, employees were confused. They were confused over the role the manager played, and they were confused over the role the owner played. In addition to that, when I went in, a lot of them didn't even know what their benefits were. They really didn't have a clear line on who they reported to, and they haven't had raises in a couple of years. So, of course, the turnover was high. What we did was we looked at everybody's job. We defined the roles and created job descriptions so employees knew what they needed to do. We implemented an employee handbook And when you're getting to a company established for 10 years with 15 employees, it's a lot harder to roll out policies and procedures after the fact because they're used to coming in and having breakfast and not being productive. They're used to coming in late and leaving early and taking long lunch breaks because they never had policies to tell them differently. And nobody ever monitored or applied any any rules consistently. So I listened to the company. I heard what their problems were, and I created an employee handbook in conjunction with them and collaborated with them. We set the tone of the handbook to read how they wanted their new culture to read. And we rolled it out. And when employees who've been there for years, who've been able to do what they want, it didn't go smoothly, which I expected not to go smoothly because once, you take the freedoms away from employees, they are resistant and they don't like change. But we were consistent with the way we rolled out the policies. We communicated that. We did some training classes. And eventually, employees started following the new policies and procedures. And now employees aren't having breakfast when they come in. They're not taking long lunches. They're more productive. We've seen an increase in sales, and employees are happy. Overall, they're happy. Some of them still remember the old days and try to push that. But again, going back to applying things fairly and consistently with all employees, they found themselves having conversations with the managers, and they are again performing and not, doing what they want. So in the end, we reduced their turnover, we increased their profits, and they're functioning in a more cohesive team atmosphere. And they are one of my success stories, which I'm happy to say. Um, Lastly, Richard Branson, who owns Virgin Airlines, I'm hoping you're familiar with him, but he is a billionaire. His quote and what he tells people often is take care of your employees and they will take care of your business. It's that simple. Happy employees have happy customers. That concludes my presentation. I wanted to leave enough time open to see if people had any information or any situations they wanted to talk to me about. If it wanted to be one-on-one, that's perfectly fine. But if they had any questions, I would be more than happy to answer. It's one reason I kept the presentation so short and sweet today. But I have my contact information here too, but I am also a SCORE mentor. And so you can go through SCORE and speak with me as well.
Yeah, if anyone has any topics they'd like to discuss, you can either cue them up in the chat or you can use the raise hand function in the React window, and we can have you come off a mute and talk. Thank everyone for attending. But as we wait here for some questions to roll in, and that was a great presentation, Daniel. We appreciate you.
Thanks.
Hmm.
Again, short and sweet, to the point.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, don't hesitate, anyone, if you have any questions. In the meantime, I've got a brief plug that I can read. Anyway, as I said in the chat, we did record this today, so if you missed any part of the presentation, the recording will be sent out shortly, or well, hopefully within business day, as Zoom makes it available to me, essentially. Uh, I'll send that out as well as a brief survey that we'd appreciate you filling out. And if you're not familiar with SCORE, we are a resource partner of the Small Business Administration. And last year in 2024, we helped start over 560 businesses here in Maine alone. And All right. Well, if there's no questions, then I suppose we can wrap up. And if you do think of any questions, you will be receiving the slides with some contact info for Danielle here, or you can apply for a SCORE mentor for free at score.org. Just simply enter your zip code and a little bit of information about your business, and it'll come right through me. I'm Jasper, our client services manager, and I hope to have clients placed within a business day or two of receiving requests. Either way, I guess I want to thank everyone for attending today. I want to thank Danielle for another great presentation. And I want to thank our sponsor today one last time, the Maine Technology Institute. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.